authors or
Sorry, Rick.
whoop?
Sorry, Rick.
Okay, no,
I'm
it's
gonna
okay.
call Joan and see if I can get her to help him. Okay.
Okay, so welcome again, and we are on Parshat Ha'azinu, which is 178. If God's ways are just, what about evil? And so that's this is your chance to talk about evil. This every week people try to talk about it, and I shoo them and say this is not the right week. And so we've come now to the right week. And Moses is, as you know, giving a series of final sermons. Um, and when I retire, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to have like the last several weeks where I'm just going to ramble on and on and on and give long concluding sermons. And if people don't like it, they'll say another 3 weeks and he's retiring.
Thanks for the warning.
Hold on a little bit longer. And okay. Opening comments. Pam, Minya.
What happened?
Since when I read this where it said mercy and justice must go together hand in hand because that is what God's power is. Does that mean that people can really do whatever they want because they know they're going to be forgiven?
No.
Good question.
I mean, this is something we associate with Christianity, that there's something that we hear about in Christianity. Every once in a while, they'll say that it doesn't matter what you may have done, you can just express regret and do tshuva even 10 minutes before you die, and then you get absolved. So we don't talk that way.
Well, it's the paragraph, it's the second paragraph on page 179. That's how I interpreted it based on what it said about power for justice and power for mercy are always combined. Without their interconnection, rabbis argue the world cannot endure. It will be out of balance and incomplete, resulting in destruction. Only by simultaneously exercising justice and mercy can God create and sustain the world. So mercy or justice alone is insufficient.
Okay, so this I think is more connected to the idea of balance, that in life you need balance, and in Judaism you need balance, and for goodness you need balance. And you may have, I'm always very worried when I meet somebody who's too nice, people that are too nice and they always want to do stuff for you and they don't want anything done for them. I mean, those people tend to be unbalanced, and they tend, if and when they strike out, they get really, really vicious. Where somebody who all along is got, they're good, but if you mess with them in a bad way, they get mad. That's more balanced. So here too, justice and mercy. You want, if somebody did something bad, you want to be, look on the good side. But on the other hand, there has to be justice. So, it gets me upset. You see this, the inconsistencies in prison sentencing, where, there was one case where a woman killed her husband and she got 8 years. And another person, there was this family that took in foster kids, and they put the foster kid in a cage, and they got something like 90 years. So, not that putting a foster kid in a cage is a good thing, but the improportionality of the sentence seemed to be, not good. But here it's mostly talking about, in the same situation, you have to have justice and mercy. So I don't interpret this at all as saying that you can repent 10 minutes before you die and everything's fine. Minya, do you want to follow that up? Did I answer your question at all, or am I just rambling?
No, you're not just rambling. I never heard of repenting 10 minutes before you die and everything's forgiven. So that's a new one for me. But
In
I think
Christianity, you never heard that?
you can repent 10 minutes before you die. No.
Well, they don't say it exactly that way, but you get less rights.
If you
That's
look
it.
at the bottom
But it's
of-
the same thing
good.
when you go into confession then. When you
If you
go
look
in,
at-
supposedly when you go into confession, you're asking for repentance and you have to do certain whatevers and then you're forgiven. So
Yes.
again, it goes back to you do your deed and then you go confess and it's forgiven.
Mhm.
bottom of page 179, the last paragraph. And to me, this sounds very, in a way, very Christian, where I thought as a Jewish person, we really didn't talk about the afterlife. We talked about the here and the now. And if you read here at the very last paragraph, early rabbinic commentators commonly answered these above questions by claiming that while righteous human beings may suffer in this world, they will be rewarded by God in the world to come.
On the bottom there.
To me, that sounds like the afterlife. The very Christian belief that there's a life after death, and that the righteous people will go to heaven, and us bad guys. I'm not including myself, of course. Will go to heaven and hell, and some of us will go just to purgatory, whatever that means. So here we see early commentators mentioning this.
We talked
Yes.
about this before, the world to come, a few weeks ago. It came up in conversation. And we did talk about that. I remember that. Because I had read in book club this author, Dara Horn, and she's written some books where she refers to that. I thought it was more of a Bubamisa, like a grandma story, mythical thing about this world to come. But you, Rabbi, said it was the souls that were in the world to come. We talked about the non-corporeal aspect of it. It's your soul that went to heaven, and that is what you look forward to, basically.
So,
Yes, Natalie, and then I have something to say whenever I
okay.
have the.
So having to do a little bit with absolution in Christianity. If when you're good, you go to heaven. If there's an afterlife in Judaism, then if you're not good and you do something evil, then what happens if there's an afterlife?
In Judaism, I mean, I guess I've said this before, but in Judaism, there's no like set belief system. So it's not like we have a book where I can say in this book is listed all the beliefs, and this is what we believe. So in the Talmud, in the Bible and in the Talmud, which are the two main sources, there are references in various places to things. These references are usually in passing. They're not comprehensive at all. So there's nowhere in the Bible where it says the next 3 chapters we're going to talk about what happens after you die. It's just not there. You could see references occasionally. A prophet will say, after you die and you go to heaven, God is going to say to you this, and then they move on. And in the Talmud, there'll be a reference. For example, there's in the Mishnah a list where it says the following have no part in the world to come. People that don't pick up what their dogs go to the bathroom and they don't use the doggy bags, they have no part in the world to come. People who, push by you in the supermarket, no part in the world to come.
Right. So if you believe that there is a world to come, then maybe if I do evil, maybe in the world to come, I can do something else to, to eradicate my evil doings on earth.
It's possible. It's possible. There's also somewhere in the Talmud where it says that if you're a really bad person, you have no share in the world to come, and your soul is just destroyed. And so it's not like a purgatory or a hell. It's just you have no world to come. And so the world to come is your soul returns to God, at least in one view. And if you're very bad, your soul won't return to God. So it's kind of a punishment by what you don't get. But then there's also ideas of Gehenna. In fact, on Rosh Hashanah morning, I just finished my sermon yesterday, and I'm talking about Gehenna, which is hell. So, I've decided that to get people to come to services more, I'm going to develop a theology where people who don't come at least 3 times a month are going to go to hell. And so, I want to warn them first so they don't end up in hell without. Hi, Joan. Hi, Cy. We see you now clearer.
This is better.
I just see you individually.
Yay.
There's well, that's, I guess, where you're supposed to see us, maybe. I sent you an email, Joan, and it bounced back.
It did? To
Yes.
pearlstone@gmail?
She's got a new
Uh,
email address.
I have a new email
Oh.
address.
Okay, well, I don't have it. But
Yeah,
Marcia has it.
I sent it to you, but you probably discarded it.
Talking about the afterlife, there's a biblical verse of Elijah going through a chariot of fire going up into heaven. And I think this is another reference sort of towards, is there a heaven or not? I don't know if they mention heaven. Yeah, they do mention heaven, I think.
Now, in a lot of Jewish sources, they cite the case of Elijah as someone who does not die. He just gets bounced up to heaven without dying. And that's one of the reasons in Jewish mythology that Elijah reappears at a lot of things, because he didn't die. He goes back and forth. He's like a commuter between heaven and earth. And so he can keep commuting. So he can go up to heaven, or he went up to heaven, but he can come back down to earth because he never died.
He's
But
doing a lot of matzah.
that's harder for people who die. We don't really have. Now, in Kabbalah, there is a form of Kabbalah where they have Gilgul Neshamot, which is the recycling of souls, that you die and then your soul is placed in another body. And so you're basically reincarnated.
I think I came before as a dog, a Saint Bernard.
Now, whether reincarnation involves other animals, that's another question. I think the Kabbalists in that particular school of thinking are thinking that your soul gets put in another human's body, that you don't have a choice of being a pet dog, which would definitely be a more relaxing and luxurious lifestyle. So, Richard, you may have to go to medical school all over again, and you'll say
law school.
Oh, you start law school.
You might have to be a rabbi.
Oh, in my next life, I've already picked what I want to do, but I may not remember it. Marcia.
I had discussions with Rabbi Moss, and I never found it satisfactory that we at some point during one of his sermons, he was talking about how if you did bad things and you repented, your repentance was taken by God so that you were more worthy than that person that never did bad things. The fact that you were evil and repented made you more valuable as a soul, if you will. I don't know how to describe it, than the non-sinner. Okay. And to my mind, I could not understand how that person who didn't sin, who knew the difference between good and bad, should be less value than the repentant person.
this is, I guess he was quoting, there is something in the Talmud about that. I don't think it's necessarily intended to be viewed of as authoritative, but one rabbi said, people who do bad things and learn from those mistakes, have a more mature um, uh, approach to life than people who are always good. I mean, I wouldn't take that as meaning that that's the view in Judaism, but I think what that rabbi is trying to express is that somebody who's always very good, and they're always the good one in class, and they remain very good person, they're a good person. But somebody who's really been through more difficult experiences, they've learned the hard way, and learning the hard way gives you a certain maturity. But I wouldn't, put it in as a ultimate value. It's just a perspective from one rabbi. And, that basically people who've had to learn the hard way, and they've learned the hard way, the school of hard knocks, that there's a certain experience that comes with that has a certain value. I think that's all that it's meant to say. And I think we understand that, right?
Yeah,
Marcia?
but I don't see it as being valid myself. I'm sorry, because
Yeah.
I mean, we all know not to hurt other people in it physically or mentally or whatever the story is, not to, rob, steal, be bad to our parents, all that stuff. We know it's wrong, and so we don't do it. But to say
Okay,
somebody who
but
ignores that, and
let's say somebody comes to my office and they say, well, I was a bank robber, and I robbed 25 banks, and then I got caught, and it was so traumatic, and I went to jail for 3 years, and now I'm out of jail, and I'm really determined to be a better person. So I can say this from that quote, that those who have been through the school of hard knocks and have learned the hard way, that this is a very valuable thing. So I think it's just meant to be able to express to a certain type of person that their goodness now has value. That you may have robbed 25 banks, that wasn't a good thing, but now you're good and you've learned the hard way, and that's important. I just think, don't take it, as far as the other rabbi maybe took it. Marcia, does that
yeah, I'm
does
still not happy. Evelyn's got something to say.
My
okay, you see,
feelings
I
are that-
can't make all my congregants happy, no matter, I tried twice with Marcia and still didn't work. Okay, Evelyn.
Isn't the individual who does good things show a greater maturity already without having to go through their own private hell and then discover that what they were doing is wrong? It seems to me that the individual who does live a responsible life is essentially a far superior individual.
I'm not arguing one way or the other. I'm just saying there's a quote in the Talmud that Marcia brings out that I can use if somebody comes in and they're a former bank robber. That's all. So I'm not disagreeing with either of you, that you were both saintly people throughout your lives. And you are great. And so don't take these sources as so authoritative. So similarly with what Natalie was saying, if we found a source in the Torah or in the Talmud that says a certain thing, it's a perspective. It's not the perspective. Judaism has a variety of perspectives, and this is an Orthodox thing as well as Reform. So different sages in the Talmud said different things. Plus, I would argue the rabbis of the Talmud are only a small percentage of what was Second Temple Judaism. You have the Sadducees, you have the Essenes, you have other groups, and what they say has relevance as well. So we don't have one way of thinking. So, but a person that did bad things and now does good things it's good. And people that never did bad things and they do good things all their lives, that's good too. Who's better? I'm going to let Evelyn and Marcia judge that.
I'm
Okay,
giving you
other
a hard
comments?
time, Rabbi.
No, it's okay. It's okay. But most of us can understand that we've had to learn the hard way sometimes, that we didn't do everything perfectly the first time. And the goal is, as we mature, to learn how to behave well and still, you know, and still enjoy life. And so over the course of time, if we can avoid being nasty to people, and we can avoid committing crimes, and if we can avoid being, doing things that are not so good, and that one of the goals of being part of a Jewish group is to be able to refine our characters, not only to do it better, but also to understand in a deeper way what the character trait is, and to try to develop a deeper understanding of the value of whatever that character trait is, which may or may not reflect itself in a changed behavior. Evelyn and Marcia have always been saintly in terms of their behaviors, but let's say they can learn from our studies more about the value of perseverance. They've always persevered, but now they understand it on a deeper level. So as you get older, you want to understand goodness in a deeper way. It'd be good if it manifests itself in greater goodness in behavioral terms. But even if it doesn't, because you're hopefully already doing good stuff, it still has tremendous value. If you just go through life with the same understanding for 90, 100, 110 years, and you're a pretty good person, but your understanding and your level of involvement in thinking about the issues is the same, I would say that's not great. You want to deepen your understanding as well as your positive behaviors. Pam.
I thought that we as Jews took a lot less emphasis on, working to get good points for the afterlife, and less than the Christians, I think, have more of an emphasis on that. I thought, we basically, we run a good life because that's the right thing to do, but we're not trying to get bonus points for the future,
And that's also stated in various places in the literature, that Jews don't put a stress in the afterlife. But there are quotes throughout the Mishnah in particular where it says, to get to the afterlife, you have to do this. And if you do any of the following things, you have no part in the afterlife. Ein Adam yesh lo chelek b'olam haba. The following people have no portion in the afterlife. So, so it depends. So the people that have said what Pam hears, they're saying, just don't take that too seriously. They're just trying to say they don't like those groups, maybe for good reason, but it really doesn't have anything to do with the afterlife. Other people might come along and say, look, they're talking about the afterlife, and why are they telling people that Judaism doesn't care about the afterlife? It's not true. So it depends what you want to stress and how you understand ancient and medieval Judaism. There's different ways to approach these things. Natalie.
I think a lot of the talk about the afterlife is to make you feel better if things aren't good in this life. So say you went through the Holocaust. Well, there's a reason for it, because you're going to be rewarded in the afterlife. That there's something to hold on to, not to give you some kind of understanding and meaning for evil.
Right. Because if you and your family are going to be killed, if that's the end, then it looks pretty dismal. So it's nice to have a little hope. And,
but also, what was it all about here on earth if it ends in such an evil manner? But it's okay, because you're going to have something later on, and that will be your reward for all this horror.
And there is a book that talks about, that says that all 6 million Jews killed in the Holocaust are going to be or have been resurrected, and that their souls go into a new body and they start over again. So if you believe that, it not only can comfort you if you were in the Holocaust, but it can comfort you just thinking about the Holocaust. So is that true? I can't address that, but
it doesn't have to be true. Human beings need something to hold on to and to provide some kind of meaning. It doesn't mean that the meaning that they've perceived or created in their own minds is valid. It's valid to them. It helps them.
Right. And that's important in its own right. So that's really, what we care about, and we don't have to say it's false. We can just say it may be true for them, and that's good enough. Whether it's true for other people, or maybe there's no science in religion. Religion and science shouldn't be put in the same sentence. We're dealing with different things. Okay, well, let's start reading. Sai, you're with us. Nod your head if you can hear me. And it was great to see you the other day. And did you have a procedure today?
I don't think he hears.
So you have to unmute. You have to unmute.
Look at this. He has a full-time tech expert there. A full-time tech expert.
Okay, there you go. Can you hear it?
Can you hear me?
Very clearly.
Okay, finally.
Go ahead.
Did you have a procedure today?
No.
On the 28th.
Okay.
We just couldn't get the thing.
No, he's talking about your outpatient surgery.
Oh, that's on the 28th. I'm sorry, I made a mistake.
That's okay, no worries.
Sai is researching on our behalf the Canaanites, and Sai is going to invite one of the Canaanites into Torah study to talk to us in a number of weeks.
Good.
And it's just a question of seeing if Google can translate. Sai's Canaanite is not so strong, but he's either going to have to learn more Canaanite or find a Google way to translate. So Sai's working on these things. Okay, who'd like to start?
I'm not an archaeologist. I'm just enjoying the book.
Minya, would you like to start reading? We're on page 178 at the top left corner. If God's ways are just, then what about evil?
Moses stands before the people of Israel as an old man. He has led them for 40 years. He has been their liberator and their teacher. Now he is about to die. The people will follow Joshua, his successor, into the land of Israel. One can imagine Moses' agony as he ponders the question, what shall be my final message to my people? The Torah presents his answer in a powerful poem. It begins with a plea that his thoughts be heard. Give ear, O heavens, let me speak. Let the earth hear the words I utter. May my discourse come down as the rain, my speech distill as the dew, like showers on young growth, like droplets on the grass. For the name of Adonai I proclaim, give glory to our God. Moses continues his poem, offering within it his understanding of God. His words are carefully chosen. They portray God in a number of significant ways. He tells the people, the rock, God's deeds are perfect. Yes, all God's ways are just. A faithful God, never false, true and upright is God. God is the source who created you, fashioned you, and made you endure. God wounds and heals. Those who reject God will be punished. Those who harm Israel will be punished. Moses' portrait of God is complex and raises a number of important questions. What does Moses mean when he calls God perfect, just, faithful, true, and upright? Can God be just and faithful and wound and heal at the same time? How can we understand God's justice? Interpreters of Torah have constantly struggled with such questions. From ancient to modern times, human beings have asked in the midst of their pain and suffering, where is God? If God is perfect, why is the world that God created so imperfect? Why do people hurt one another? Why does a God of justice allow hunger, war, and disease? Why does God permit loving and generous human beings to be tortured by disease or cruelty, or innocent children to be abused, starved, or killed? Can we really say that God's deeds are perfect, just, never false, true, and upright?
Okay, thank you, Minya. Comments, responses, Donna, Rich, Natalie, Shirley? Yes, Rich.
You can't understand God's so great, so perfect, so magnificent. We can't understand all the things that he does. And I think an interpreter says that. So that's, I think, some of the things we have to understand, that God can do all these things at the same time, but we as human beings imperfectly understand God's ways and the things that he does, or God does. I shouldn't say he. I don't think God is amorphous.
God is amorphous. What does that mean? God
He's
is amorphous.
God is in everything. God doesn't have a physical being.
He's
So
not
God is
real.
He's not human. He's not a dog. He's not a cat.
God is not sitting on a
I'm saying that in the generic term, he, she, it. God just exists before the universe started, after the universe started. This is the concept, my concept at least, and that we can't understand all the things that God has done. We're too imperfect as human beings.
but it looks to us that God's not doing a very good job.
No, that's not it. Maybe he didn't do a good job with humans, but then that's for God to decide, not us.
Okay. Response, Pam, Liz. Hi, Liz. Liz was in a conference, but she's here earlier than expected. So welcome to you.
Thank you.
You have glasses now?
Yeah.
Okay. You look much more serious than before.
And studious.
So welcome to you. So responses, if God is so perfect, why is the world such a mess? I mean, there have been books written with that title. Marcia? No?
It's an
Okay,
everlasting question. Yeah.
Natalie?
Stop it, Freckles.
The cat has
Oh,
something
there
to say.
we have another participant.
Don't be bad.
My dogs aren't here, they're on vacation again. Okay. Who'd like to read? Anyone want to take over for Minya? We're in the middle of page 178 on the right-hand column. Despite the
I'll read it.
anguish. Okay, Marcia. Despite the anguish, about halfway down right-hand column, 178.
Despite the anguish they have experienced, many Jews, like the prophet Isaiah, maintain the faith expressed by Moses, that Adonai is a God of justice, Isaiah. In his time, the psalmist articulates the same determination. Your righteousness is like the mighty mountains, your judgments are like the great deep. For centuries, Even in the darkest times of persecution, many Jews have declared their faith in the ultimate justice of God.
Okay, so
Others go-
Psalms is something we really should study because it's poetry, it's beautiful, and it's got a lot of wisdom if you can, understand the words themselves. And sometimes the Psalms comment on other parts of the Torah and the Tanakh. Other times it says interesting things that are new. So here the Psalm says, your righteousness is like the mighty mountains. So is that a good thing to be compared to a mountain? I mean, a mountain is like tall and tough and has like bushes on it. And I don't know that, wouldn't it be better to be compared to an ice cream cone or a skyscraper, or why a mountain? And
It's everlasting, so to speak, I think.
Pam,
Well, I think a mountain is indication of strength. And ice cream is.
right? Righteousness is something you need strength for. What is righteousness?
Right, when you're righteous, it's because I think you have a certain strength of understanding of God.
Mhm.
Doing the correct thing at the right time.
Yes, what
For the
Marcia
right
said.
But I said,
for the right reason. I mean, I'm thinking a lot about the sacrifice of Isaac because I'm talking about that on Saturday, and about human sacrifice. It's going to be a rather a gruesome sermon in some ways. But there's one commentator that attacked Abraham that maybe he did the right thing, but by not sacrificing Isaac, but for the wrong reasons. So you can do the right thing for the wrong reason, and that's not so good either, right? If you really want to be a mature adult, you need to think about why you're doing something or not doing something, not just what to do or what not to do. But so righteousness is like a mountain, and your judgments are like the great deep. What's the great deep?
the sea.
Okay.
The
And
ocean.
so God's judgment is like the bottom part of the sea. I mean, when I think of the dark part of the sea, where that pilot in Malaysian Airlines 370 wanted to ditch his plane with all his passengers and commit mass murder in a place where nobody would find the plane for many, many years. So he turned his plane around instead of just crashing it somewhere randomly. And he flew the plane for like 8 hours to the most deep part of the ocean, in the Indian Ocean, and past Western Australia. And that's where he landed the plane, in the water. So when it sank, it would go so deep they would never find it. And like several years later, they still haven't found it. So the great deep is good judgment. Well, I don't get that at all. Richard, help us here.
No,
You're a doctor, then maybe your perspective from medicine might help here.
where you talking? Where is this?
The last, in the, within the paragraph I read that starts despite the anguish. About 2 or 3 sentences in.
Yeah, it's hard for me to answer any of these things, and I think it depends on your perspective, and I look down further about others go even further. The next paragraph, for them, God's justice tempered by equally powerful claims of mercy and love. And I remember your first seminar I heard about the four gods, which I thought was going to be something about the different religions, and I found it was only about God and a bit different perspectives of God. It depends on you what you believe in God about mercy and other things. So I think everybody has a different perspective, so it's something that can't actually be answered perfectly.
I think
How's that for being around the bush like a politician?
Yeah, well, you should have been a politician instead of a doctor, but I guess there are quite a few politicians that gave up medicine to become politicians
Yeah, Rand
as
Paul's one of them. He was an ophthalmologist.
amazing. You think that they would do more good as a doctor than as a politician. Marcia.
So the judgments are like the great deep. I think they're that's what you say about the deep, unfathomable. You don't know why something is happening, and only God reasons out why it's happening. Sometimes something happens in your life and you say why, and then you realize a few years later, if things hadn't evolved in the way they did, if the way they did evolve was eventually probably for the best. You just don't know why something is happening, and I think that's what that means.
But I'm friendly with Cy, and I'm friendly with Cy because I understand some of his personality and a little bit of his history. And so because I can understand where he's coming from to some degree, I can be friends with him. If I can't understand God and God doesn't seem to make sense to me, then how can I have a relationship with an entity that I don't understand?
You have
It's
to trust.
trust. Okay, and that in Hebrew bitachon, you have to have trust. And my Orthodox friend who I was in touch with this morning, even though he has never spoken to our group, and you know, that's exactly what he would say. You have to have trust. But I don't have a lot of trust. I want to see that God is behaving in a way that I can understand. Otherwise, it just seems like, you know, excuses. Okay, who was reading? Wait, Cy and Liz and, okay, comments, Cy and then Liz.
Well, while listening to the conversation, the thing that disturbs me is the fact that all of us try to live the best kind of lives. And basically because it's a relationship with other people. If we were to do all the things that perhaps we really wanted to do, life would not be nearly as well as we had hoped it would be. And in addition to that, the people we live with realize that we all are making mistakes. So we set up certain parameters as to how we should live our life. For example, the Constitution of the United States, how we live. And to me, God is not the most important thing. And it's only that some of us believe in the God because it goes beyond their normal thinking. But if you think rationally, you do the things because you want to get along with the people around you. If everybody was killing everybody else, it would not be a happy set of circumstances. If we thieved from everybody else, if we did bad things, it would be good. We must live with everybody else. And that's why I think we have these consciences, if you will, of goodness, of charity, of the things that make life pleasant.
Well put, Cy. Well put.
Okay, Liz.
I think that's the biggest struggle is what you were saying. Like, how do you how do you trust God when you don't see him behaving in ways that you understand, or when you see really awful things happen? How do you, when somebody dies way before it seems is their time, what is there left to pray for? I think, like once, I mean, I'm just speaking from personal experience of a very young person, a family friend who recently died of leukemia. At first when she was sick, you pray for her health and you pray for a miracle and this will change, that'll change. And then as things got worse, then you pray this will turn around and it won't come to that and whatever. And then when things get so bad that well, the end is near, I mean, you pray for, her not to be in pain. But then at some point you're like, well, what am I praying for anymore? It's clear this is not going the way I'm hoping and that my prayers aren't really coming true. So for me personally, that's my biggest struggle.
And so what would be your answer to that?
I don't know. looking for that.
Maybe that's the unfathomable.
Richard,
That maybe is the
Rich-
unfathomable thing inside. I have a little question to ask you about your answers regarding righteousness of people, how they get together. Let's look at the opposite. Let's look at criminality. Criminals do things that we consider bad, but does the criminal consider it bad? When particularly if they're a sociopath, the person who kills multiple people and hides it, will God punish them in the end? Because do they understand what they're doing? They're sociopathic. I remember listening to something about Merle Haggard. And I think a lot of people know who Merle Haggard. I think everybody here probably knows Merle Haggard, a very famous, still living songwriter and singer of country music. He was a criminal. He spent years in prison. He used to one of his specialties was breaking out of prison. And finally, they put him in San Quentin, where he could never get out. And one of his friends in prison decided he's going to break out. And Merle said, "I'm going to go with you." And the guy said, "No, you have a future outside of prison. Serve your term." The guy went out. He broke out. He and another guy. He killed a police officer. He ended up getting captured and ended up getting executed. So what does it mean to be criminal versus somebody who is always right? I don't understand that. And again, I don't understand why God would let somebody be a criminal. But yet we see criminals who become good and criminals who are good, but yet do bad things.
Now, Richard made reference to the course we offered twice or three times on America's Four Gods, which is that in America, sociologists have found that 90-something% of Americans see God in one of four ways. So when we're having this discussion about God, we're probably among the 12 of us, we probably have those four conceptions of God. And just to review them quickly, they're answering two questions. Does God take a part in an active role in history? Does God play a role in the world? So some people say yes, some people say no. So if you say no, then you can't expect God to intervene in anything. And then the other question is, does God judge us? Either while we're alive or after we're passed away. So based on those, you say yes, yes, no, no, yes, no, and no, yes. You end up with four very different types of gods. So that's why we called it America's Four Gods. So here we're having one discussion with 12 people, but there's four gods in the room or on the internet. So which God you're talking about makes a big difference. Okay, Steve.
Well, in regards to Liz's situation, I understand her disbelief and lack of faith, and especially with a young child or a young person who contacts this kind of disease and is in dire pain and what can you do? How can you justify that individual's suffering? What can you do to say that? What I don't have an answer for it either, Liz.
But I was going to ask you, Steve, so how would you relate to that?
To me, first of all, it requires faith, a belief in something or someone to get me through it. To me, that would be the essential part is faith.
Because Steve, do you want to believe, or do you believe that God can heal a sick child or
Yes.
could have prevented the Holocaust?
Yes.
Okay.
I believe prayers help in the healing, whether they survive or not. It still gives you the satisfaction that you are thinking about this individual and hoping for a good result.
Okay. How many people have known closely a child who's gotten very sick and died? you know, someone in their family or something, or a neighbor that is very close. Okay, so about a third of us. And does that matter as opposed to just hearing about it on the news or talking about, you know, where something terrible happened in general, like the Holocaust, or they just had an earthquake in Morocco where at least 3,000 people died in seconds, including children that had not done anything. They were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Is that different than knowing somebody close to you in your family or a close family friend? Marcia?
Well, I guess Richard, being a doctor, has gone through this so many times with patients. My son, he wasn't a baby, he was an adult and dying of cancer. And I called hospitals literally all over the country, trying to see if they were working on a program, had a, any tests going on, I can't think of the word, right? Protocols that they were working on to, for new methods of curing this particular kind of cancer. And I tried, it just wasn't going to happen. And I remember my son saying, I was born too soon. The science isn't there yet. And they're working on it, stem cell and this and that. And that's man trying to help with this. And I think we have to hope that in the future, science will help us cure some of these diseases. I know my congregation prayed for him when he was so sick and undergoing surgeries and, different methods of curing what you were using at the time, chemos and radiations and stuff like that. And it made him feel better to know that those prayers were there for him. And that's important too. And you just have to, you just have to hope that it's going to turn out okay. I don't think you can ascribe that to God's judgment of I know we're going to talk about it, who shall live and who shall die. And that's so hard to go through when you're saying those prayers, when you're knowing, is it really so, when you're saying that prayer in another couple of days, I don't think God is making that kind of a judgment. I think it just happens, but I don't know what to say about that.
Now, Rabbi Harold Kushner said that God is all good and God loves us and wants to help us, but God doesn't control illness. That's part of the physics of the world. It's just part of the necessity of creating a world where things can go on. So people have to die and people have to be born, and the dying process is not calibrated to only putting to death elderly people who were bad. It's some are elderly bad, some are elderly good, some are young who were very bad, and some are young who are very good. It's a randomish process.
We're
I mean,
we're a biologic beings, and the plant, my tree died outside. My 50-foot Palo Verde died a week ago, collapsed and died on me. A plant dies, an animal dies, people die. It's going to happen. It's going to happen in various ways, and we can't control it. And I don't think God does either.
so Steve believes that you can control it,
Oh, you
right?
can control it with medications and things like that.
No, that God can control it. So Steve doesn't agree with Kushner. Steve, is that correct?
Well, I know that I'm aware of his book. Good things happen, bad things happen to good people. But yeah, I still believe that faith is the source. I mean, that's what gives you a better feeling in your soul and in your life.
Mm-hmm.
But do you think that God controls everybody's diseases?
No, I don't agree with that. No.
Minya and Natalie, and then if Cy, Liz, or Pam or Evelyn want to say anything. Minya and Natalie.
I had a student in my class many years ago whose father thought it would be better if he and his children went to heaven together. So he shot the girl that was in my class, her brother who was in kindergarten, and then killed himself. And his wife, talking about faith, her faith was so strong that she said that this must have been God's will and that they're going to a better place and they will be together. And eventually, when she dies, she says, then I will join them. But talking about faith, I could really not understand how she could have such tremendous faith. She was Catholic, such tremendous faith that it would help her through such a difficult time.
Did she know what her husband was going to do?
No, apparently she had gone to a bridal shower and he was home with the kids and he had a rifle in the house. She knew he had a rifle, but she never thought he would do it to the kids, and he did. So he shot the two of them and then himself.
Natalie and then Evelyn.
I think that there's a real difference between faith and hope. So a lot of the times, say if someone is sick and you say a prayer, sometimes a lot of it is, I hope, whether you're literally saying the words, but I hope that they're better. I hope that the outcome is different. I don't know if it's always that you really have faith that whatever the outcome is, you'll be able to accept it, or that something is doing it, creating this situation for a reason that we're unaware of.
Hey, Evelyn.
I think I agree with Natalie. I think essentially when we say a prayer, we are essentially hoping for a good outcome. It enables us to cope with the situation better by saying these prayers. But apropos of what Marcia was saying in terms of illnesses, when you stop and think that in recent years, cancers have exploded exponentially, as they say, and there is much more cancer prevalent. Why is this prevalent? Because man has tried to manipulate his environment, and in doing so has caused poisonous substances. And therefore, when you remember Rachel Carson, The Silent Spring, by having chemicals, it affected the hatching of eggs because the eggs did not have sufficient calcium in it. People have been exposed to chemicals in our food. In other words, man is manipulating the environment, and as a result is causing not only illnesses, but also actual extinctions of different species. And frankly, I think man at some point is going to extinct himself with all of the weaponry and everything else. When you think of what went on in Wuhan, China, where the COVID escaped from the lab, more of this could wipe out whole populations, and therefore getting a little off the subject. But the point is, though, that there are things in our environment that perhaps we could control better, but because man, being what he is creating havoc. And if we can't cope with it and hope for the best, then I think the answer is you say a prayer, but does God actually listen? You have to believe in not only a universal God who created the universe, this entity, whatever it is, but also we hope that there is a personal relationship. This is human beings wanting a relationship with God on a more personal level. This is how we can better cope ourselves. And so psychologically, we say a prayer, but as Natalie said, it's really more of a hope and a wish as such.
Donna, comments about, do you feel that if you had a neighbor that had a child that was sick, that you could pray to God and that might help?
Yes. I have a firm belief that God is God. Do I influence God? Maybe. But God does what God is going to do. And I did have a grandson as an adult in his 20s, had leukemia, and was at death's door many times. He had a transplant, and it was very, very difficult. And I was living in Israel at the time, so I know that my daughter had a very hard time with this, and her husband and the rest of the family. And we didn't know. We did not know if this young man was going to live or if God was going to take him. And I also have a belief that nobody dies that God does not take. I know a lot of people disagree with that, but that is what I believe. Now, his name is Adam, and Adam is very much alive today. He's in his mid-30s. He's healthy. And so did all of our prayers influence God? I don't know how much they do, because as I say, in the end, I believe God is going to do what God is going to do. But who else said those prayers help? Those prayers, as I am praying for his healing, they help me. They increase my faith, because if I didn't have faith, I wouldn't be praying to God. And I don't know where that leaves me with you or whatever, but that's it.
Well, I think you can see already in this group of 12 people that we have at least 3 views about God and God's role in helping or not helping people, at least 3 so far. And there's 1 or 2 more that I guess people haven't spoken, but I'm sure that there's 4 or 5 views. So you're in one of those groups there, Donna. You know, Natalie.
I have a granddaughter who's now 14, and she's multiply handicapped. And when she was born, she was in the hospital 10 times the first year. And people would say, oh, how terrible, whatever, what can I do? And I would always say, hug your own grandchildren, be grateful, and pray for her. And it didn't matter what they believed in. The person that cleaned my house that came from Guatemala, all that communal prayer helped me at the time.
Liz?
I like the response, and sorry, I'm learning everybody's names, but I think that the explanation, and I've thought of it a lot too, of how we've kind of poisoned our environment ourselves in our, it's in our food, it's in our water, it's in the air, it's in everything. God doesn't necessarily have control over that. So, I mean, I'd like to try to think of it that way, that God obviously does have the best of intentions and wants us all to be healthy and live long lives, but we are getting in our own way of doing that.
Mm-hmm. Natalie?
No, I was drinking. I raised my arm.
But Rabbi, the
Yes,
fact
Marcia.
that we feel better when people pray for us and with us, that makes a big difference. And that makes a difference in the communal prayer that we do when we go to the sanctuary and pray. And I think knowing that there are people around us who are wishing the same thing that we are, the best for our sick ones, our families, you know, ourselves, you know, you know, I'm tearing up saying it. It makes a big difference that people pray for each other. I think without that, it would be a very sterile, cold world to live in.
Okay,
I
Sai.
agree.
I think, I
Okay,
think
Sai
that
and then Donna.
God has been very remiss recently. The earthquake in Morocco, where thousands and thousands of people have been either damaged or killed. It's amazing that they don't want to, the Moroccans don't want to accept help from some of the nations of the world that were willing to give them help. I don't know if God was in on that deal. It would seem to me that if he was, he did the wrong thing.
Well, Donna.
I also want to agree with Marcia. Yes, if you are sick and you know people are praying to God, the same God that you believe in, whether you believe that he's going to change his mind or not, that it's not important. But the fact that these people are thinking of you, they're praying for you. And yes, I can tell you that the month of July and August, when I was not here and I was in and out of hospitals, and my doctor told me at the end, he said, you were a disaster. I thought, okay, but I'm here now. And it really helped me to know that the people of this congregation were praying for me.
We really prayed hard, and we know you and we care about you, and we wanted you to get better. And you know, we're happy that you're going to make the Olympics.
I'm going to make the Olympics.
Steve.
Well, I agree with Donna. Same situation. A number of people called me or emailed me or texted me, you know, wishing me, you know, better health. And it really did fill my heart knowing that people were thinking of me, you know, whether they could help me or not, I don't know. You know, I mean, they didn't come to my house, but I just, you know, that feeling, that good feeling is what was it all that made it much, much better for me. And I do believe that it did help me.
If they had knocked on your door with chicken soup, would that have made you feel better?
Oh, much, much better, especially if it had matzo ball in it.
Marcia.
Do you think that knowing that someone is praying for you actually, I've heard that it does make a difference in your healing? Do you know that you have a community of well-wishers or whatever you want?
Well, of course, it depends what you have, right? So if you've got this disease that's ravishing you terribly, you may barely be in consciousness, and it may not, you know, but under a lot of circumstances, I think it can make a huge difference. Sure. I mean, you know, they say that a lot of times in some situations that, you know, your determination is really very important.
Yes.
And I, you know, of course, we all know when people, you know, sometimes when they're dying, but they can keep going for a long time, and then they're going because they're waiting for some
someone to
relative
show up.
to come from Japan. And when
Right.
the relative comes, and then they see the relative for a day or two, then they're ready to die, and then they die. So now, you know, you can't keep going forever. We're all going to die at some point, and that's the tragic reality. But I think we have, certainly most of us will have some control over the timing to some degree, hopefully. Pam.
Well, I think an important part of getting better is wanting to be better. And when you have people praying for you, you know, you feel like, okay, we're part of a team now to get, you know, for me to get better. And you don't want to let down the team.
Mm-hmm. Now I wanna skip to page 180 at the bottom left-hand column. I'm gonna skip my favorite philosopher, Maimonides, or rationalist, because rationalism really doesn't have much to help us here. So at the bottom paragraph on page 180, left-hand column, I'll read it. Maimonides' view that God's power of justice and mercy are beyond human understanding is not shared by Jewish mystics. They believe that evil enters the world at creation. Rabbi Isaac Luria teaches that God created the world out of a clash between the powers of mercy and judgment, right? There's the different sfirot, and one of them is mercy and one of them is judgment. In that collision, sparks of light and love were lodged into dark shells that make up all the substance of the world. We suffer, Luria maintains, because so much is still locked up in such shells. The human responsibility is to liberate the light, to free goodness and healing. God's will is for justice, truth, and mercy. God, dependent on human beings, is waiting for them to break the dark shells and release God's power for mercy and love. This is the Lurianic Kabbalistic approach to this subject, and it's completely contrary to Maimonides. Comments?
So is that saying, is that saying that what we've just been talking about with community prayer, community hope, is us releasing that power?
Is trying to repair the damage that was done to the world at creation, trying to get to those dark, what he calls here the shells, and to liberate the light. And the more you can do that, the more light you can bring in the world, and therefore the more mercy and judgment you can put into balance. And that the more we can do that, the more we can have an impact, a positive impact on the world. And if we don't, then we'll continue to suffer from various things. All right, well, I'll keep going.
When
Donna.
when I hear you talking about Maimonides, he's a very important person in Israel and has the greatest, well, maybe not the greatest, but one of the largest hospitals in Haifa, named Rambam after him. And they have, my friend there sent me an aerial view of the hospital, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, look how this has grown since I've been gone. And one thing that they did there for health was they have an underground parking garage. Parking is a problem anywhere in Israel. And so they have this huge, huge parking garage that can be cleaned out in just really a very short period of time and made into more hospital rooms and more hospital treatment down underneath the ground. And I just always have a place in my heart for him because he is so revered that they would do that with this huge hospital and name it after him.
Okay, thank you, Donna. Let me continue. Right-hand column 180. Modern philosopher Martin Buber amplifies this mystic insight about evil. He writes, what we call evil is not merely in human beings, it is in the world. It is the uncleanness of creation. We know what has been proclaimed by the anonymous prophet, whose word stands in the second part of the book of Isaiah. Like light and darkness, good and evil have been created by God. The abyss of the absence of light and the struggle for light have been created for God. For Buber and for Jewish mystics, evil is real. It is embedded in the dark shells, the material of the universe. Since God could not create the universe without such material or potentials, human beings, like all other forms of life, must be subjected to evil and its awful consequences. Nevertheless, Buber adds that we have the power to liberate the good and diminish the evil. Everything wants to be hallowed, to be brought into the holy. Everything wants to come to God through us. God wills man for the work of completing creation. God waits for us. The task of humanity is to reduce evil and its suffering in the world. God, whose ways are just, true, and merciful, depends upon us. Comments?
Um, yeah, I think we're going to be,
Donna and then Pam.
I think that we're probably going to be a deep study of when we start the Torah study in Genesis, because it relates to exactly what we've been talking about now. And personally, I believe that it was perfect when God created it. It fell when Eve decided to bow before the devil.
Oh, blame it on Eve.
Oh my.
I think, did I open Pandora's box? I'm sorry if I
She has hired one of those big law firms to represent her against this libelous charge that she is at fault for everything. Pam.
I just wanted to get from you, what exactly they meant by completing creation? Implying that creation is incomplete now?
Yes. Yes, that the act of creating the world forced the breaking of the vessels, which meant that the act of creation was not really done well. And as a result, there was all these klipot thrown out all throughout the universe. And to complete creation, you have to repair the world. And that's called in English tikkun olam. So what
Yeah,
the
the
social
world.
committee does, and we have here one of the co-chairs of the Social Action Committee, is to try to repair the world. It's not just bringing in a pancake mix for people who don't have homes. It's repairing the world in the broader cosmic sense. Every time you give a box of pancake mix to somebody who needs it, you're helping in a little way to repair the world. And that can do far more than help feed some pancakes to people who need pancakes. Richard? Shirley?
Well, from you look at astrophysics, is the world complete? Is the universe complete? We see new suns being formed all the time according to astrophysics. I don't understand all the physics that they're talking about, but they say new worlds are being formed all the time. So is evolution, and we see things evolving all the time. Human beings, maybe 2 million years from now, won't be human beings if the Earth is still around. We haven't destroyed it. We might not be human Homo sapien. We'll be Homo sapiens something or other, evolved into something different slowly. So I can't see that the world is static or the universe is static, and that creation has been completed. I think it's ongoing forever. At least that's my personal feeling.
Good, thank you. Pam, Cy, Minya, Natalie.
If all of us have a portion of God in us, and here they're talking about the world being incomplete, and we as humans have the obligation, and how wonderful that is that we can help God in our own way in his work, or the work of God. I just like that concept. I don't know if I'm going into the evil and the dark shells and all of that, but the part that I described resonates with me.
Even then, Cy, and then I think we're done.
Okay. Well, let's talk about climate change. What are the humans, or what is the world trying to do to help with climate change?
Not enough.
Not enough. But then again, we are doing some things, that will help, eliminate climate change and maybe make this a better place, not only just for ourselves, but for future generations down the line. Therefore, we need to move forward and help with this situation. I mean, there are other ways to make tikkun olam, giving blood, for people that are in need. Not only just giving food, but maybe volunteering at a food bank or, at a thrift store or places like that. There's a number of ways that we can make a difference, and maybe even also to help combat evil.
Very nice. And if you want to do concrete things, you can join the Social Action Committee. And you just send Steve a note and you can do something concrete to help the world in a small way.
All
Si.
right.
Well, it's a little disappointing to me in that all the world's great religions propose pretty much the same thing: goodness, charity, everything that we've been discussing. But yet it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. The situations continue to get worse, if anything. And so I lose a lot of faith in what God is supposed to do. For me, it's just somebody's idea, but nothing is happening from it. Nothing concrete is happening from it. I'm talking about the big issues, the things that affect the world. If anything, for so many people, it's a very, very negative effect rather than a positive effect. And I was just thinking while the discussion was going on, since I'm of that era, when Hitler ran Germany, they tried to assassinate him 4 times, and it didn't happen. God didn't let them assassinate him. And it's not right.
Steve, and then if Liz wants to say something, and then we'll conclude.
Okay. Well, we've had mass shootings. Okay. And our temple has taken the precaution and also, make sure that our building and the surrounding area is safe. But, it took a lot of work to implement these policies, making sure that people flow through the lobby so they don't congest in order for a individual who wants to do harm, we can avoid that, or at least try to. So, I mean, there is evil, but we need to understand what that evil is and maybe combat it, and create a safer environment itself. That's what I have to say.
Okay, Liz?
I'm just interested in hearing your commentary when we do get to the book of Genesis about Eve now, because my best friend is Christian, and anytime I ask her, well, what's wrong with this world, or how could that happen, that's her response. She believes wholeheartedly that is how evil got into the world, but I have a hard time believing that.
Well, I can't say we're being recorded, and if I criticize Eve, she'll sue me. So I have to be
Rabbi,
very
I
what
have a
I say.
question.
Yes.
We're talking about security now. Has our building been threatened or any people?
No. No. We've
Okay.
just been taking precautions
Okay.
and being ready if in case does happen.
Because today all synagogues are targets, and not only all synagogues, but all buildings of any sort. These shooters will shoot movie theaters and post offices, and you don't have to be a Jewish place, you don't have to be anything.
Hey,
So,
Joe, shut it off.
okay. Anyway, I'm sorry if we didn't come to a theologically satisfying conclusion today. We have a situation where we're never ever going to come up with a satisfactory answer, and they say that Judaism is very much better at asking good theological questions rather than giving definitive answers to those questions. So if you take it in that spirit, I think we accomplished a lot today. If you're really looking for an answer, how can bad things happen to good people? Then I'm afraid that we failed. But we did find that there are some totally righteous people in our group, and we did find that there are some that are not so righteous. And so we're a good group, together to try to battle on and to try to make the world a better place as much as we can, with God's help or without God's help, depending on what. Okay, so next week we're concluding with page 188, the heritage of the congregation of Jacob, and we'll conclude now with the final blessing. And thank you all for being here. And we join together in the final blessing. Steve, was there any announcement?
Excuse me, can you send me the prayer for the beginning and the ending?
Well, let Charlotte do that.
Okay.
I would like,
Okay, I'll
Emily,
ask her.
Okay,
I would like that too,
of
please.
course, of course.
Okay, can you
Thank
both
you.
ask Charlotte to send it to you?
I'll have it send it. Let me have it send it to everybody again, just in case.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's conclude with the blessing together.
Baruch
Atah Adonai,
Elohim
Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet,
et
v'chaye olam atah b'tokeinu.
Baruch
Atah Adonai, notein haTorah. Blessed is Adonai our God,
God,
ruler
ruler
of the universe,
who
who
has
has given
given
us the teaching of truth, implanted within us eternal life.
Blessed is
Blessed is Adonai, giver of the Torah.
Torah.
Shana Tova, everyone.
Shana Tova.
Healthy and peaceful year, and make sure that you do it with love.
Amen.
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 Have a good one, everyone.
Thank you. You too.
Shavua Tov.
Shanu Tov.